let's recognize for a second. This huge and crazy party was incredible, but the sad truth behind it made it less enjoyable. These people letting it all out and drinking and intoxicating themselves numb are not celebrating for success. They are celebrating their last few moments in the industry before being extinct. No one in this room could have ever known that the world that they are living in is undergoing a big shift, wiping away every member. Babylon placed during the 1920s where silent movies took over the world in Hollywood. In the early 1930s, sound was introduced to moving pictures, reforming the industry entirely. The consequences are phenomenal, but many people suffer and can't handle the new shift. Many of them ending up in killing themselves or being rejected. We need a little bit of scientific context. A so-called paradigm shift is a phenomenon that we find regularly in our culture and science. Thomas S. Kuhn was a historian and philosopher of science. In 1962, he published a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. There he describes paradigm shifts as fundamental changes in the basic concepts and practices of a discipline. In the first phase, he explains how this happens. Paradigm shifts happen when a current dominant paradigm is rendered incompatible with new phenomena, resulting in an adoption of a new paradigm. This is seen in Babylon as the integration of sound in movies makes silent films dissolute and obsolete. In the second phase, the silent film era is thrown into a state of crisis. For Kuhn, there is a willingness to try anything to push the boundaries of the current discipline and the expression of explicit discontent. The new domain gains its own new followers. Here it is shown as producers and wealthy people. According to Max Planck, a new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. That perfectly fits into the story of Babylon, where, for example, Nellie Leroy and Jack Conrad try to survive this shift in Hollywood by doing more movies and connecting more with the new community. In doing so, they are indirectly keeping the old tradition alive. The era only ends when Jack Conrad kills himself and Nellie Leroy disappears and is found dead later on. Their deaths finally mark the end of the silent film era. He describes that in the long run, the new paradigm becomes institutionalized as the dominant one. This cycle, inspired by the hype cycle of Gardner Inc., can show us what a new invention undergoes once it is introduced to the world. After moving pictures established in our society, the silent film era reached its peak in the 1920s. And as long as no new genre or technical revolutions come along, the current traditions stay at its peak. That's why we could witness these wonderful filmmakings in the second part of the movie, where they produced multiple different movies in one place. Once the paradigm shifts, the former degrades. The initiation of a new invention, here it is sound, triggers a boost of expectations, resulting in explosion-like and excessive application of the new invention. Here it becomes ferocious. Freeloaders jump on any project they see, people from the old tradition get stigmatized and rejected, and the new invention becomes glorified and old techniques suddenly are unappealing and neglected. This is shown by the nerve-wracking scene in the film studio, where every little acoustic disturbance forced the crew to start over the scene. Overall, the prize is huge. People are forgotten, old products are thrown away, many new people in this era have no experience and consider old knowledge as obstructive and insufficient, and the wrong people can have access to these new products, like this mysterious and creepy mobster that leads many tourists in a pillbox where kinky and cocky imaginations and subconscious drives take place. However, once the new film sound era dominates the industry, the old era doesn't extinct entirely, but after its downfall, it reaches its plateau and stays on this level. This all does sound so tragic, and Hollywood appears to be so cruel and ungrateful. But to give you some solace, let's listen one last time to Kuhn. The data we all, be it in scientific and non-scientific areas, are dealing with always stays the same. It's the selective collections of those data and their assembly and the methods being used that give birth to a specific form form of expression in film. The story is the same, which is exactly why we experience Singing in the Rain countless times, just in diverse forms in film. It has always been about storytelling, about love, friendship, revenge, regret, happiness, sadness, and all the other archetypes that dwell within us. This is perfectly illustrated in the final scenes of this masterpiece. A historian once said it right. It's like picking up the other end of the stick, a process that involves handling the same bundle of data as before, but placing them in a new system of relations with one another by giving them a different framework. Manny Torres, an old and forgotten member of the industry, sitting in the cinema and spectating the complete section of moving pictures Hollywood has produced so far. And that not being enough, it illustrates the primary colors that gather themselves to every other existing color. By extension, every single movie scene, meaning that everything does come from the same principles. It is just that every form has different proportions and relations of the primary colors. A little bit more blue makes it Avatar. A little bit more red makes it a slasher, and a little bit more yellow makes it nostalgia. This we should not forget. We all are dealing with the same material, with the same stuff. Just how we put things together creates a new form, a new symbol for the same truth. Coming back again to the citation at the beginning. It is true that everything was burned to ashes, and it is also very true that this industry did not credit the people for their part and contribution to this industry enough. African Americans, Latin Americans, and Native Americans, but also many hardworking women and men in general. But just like a phoenix that set fire to itself when it becomes weak and old, moments later, the industry undergoes a resurrection and rebirth to a fresh life. New techniques, new morals, diverse members, and new film. This cycle shall never end. And don't forget the final scene where Manny Torres sits in the cinema. He is observing how many people enjoy the old movies, enjoy the old scenes and members, and appreciate them. Whether Hollywood is on the right path, I cannot say. But what I am observing is that Hollywood has reached its peak, and Kuhn never constricted paradigm shifts for little defined domains. What if the industry as a whole needs to undergo a new shift?